Coal made distance possible before distance became unavoidable. By the end of this examination, the British Empire will appear less as an expansion of decision and more as a system held in motion by fuel and passage, a structure sustained only so long as energy and routes aligned faster than interruption could accumulate. This matters because certain forms of power do not fail when challenged. They strain when the conditions that allowed movement begin quietly narrowing, repeating across geography wherever mobility depends on continuous supply rather than proximity. An island sits off the western edge of the Eurasian landmass. Its coastline is irregular, cut deeply by estuaries and natural harbors. Inland distances remain short. Rivers are navigable but limited in scale. Beneath much of the terrain lie dense coal seams concentrated in northern and central regions: South Wales, Yorkshire, Northumberland, the Scottish lowlands. Extraction sites rest within measurable distance of tidewater ports. Across the surrounding seas extend narrow passages rather than open barriers. The English Channel compresses continental proximity into less than 30 miles at its narrowest point. To the north lies the North Sea, shallow but heavily trafficked. Westward opens the Atlantic, uninterrupted until the Americas. Southward, maritime corridors connect to the Mediterranean through Gibraltar, a fixed aperture between oceans. Beyond Europe, distance expands dramatically. India lies over 6,000 nautical miles away by sea. East Asia farther still. Australia exists across hemispheric separation. Every connection between island and territory passes through water. Every shipment depends on vessels carrying fuel sufficient not only for travel outward, but for return. Coal moves first by rail toward ports. Ports connect to steamships. Steamships extend reach beyond prevailing wind patterns that once limited sailing empires. Fixed coaling stations emerge along predictable intervals: Malta, Aden, Colombo, Singapore, Cape Town, Hong Kong. Each location functions less as territory than as interruption prevention, points where motion pauses only long enough to continue. The distances themselves remain unchanged. Steam replaces wind, but removes autonomy. A sailing vessel adjusts to weather. A steamship adjusts to fuel. Movement becomes calculable, regular, dependent. Ships cannot deviate indefinitely. Routes stabilize into lanes defined by consumption rates and replenishment intervals. Silence enters here. A ship leaving Britain carries not only cargo or personnel, but the requirement of future coal already waiting ahead. The voyage presumes infrastructure existing beyond the horizon. Expansion, therefore, precedes arrival. Stations must exist before traffic increases. Protection must precede dependency. Sea lanes narrow into obligations long before they appear secure. Coal accumulates at depots across oceans. Storage requires labor, dockyards, defensive installations, repair capacity. Each station demands resupply from elsewhere. Coal mined in Britain crosses the same seas required to sustain distant fleets intended to protect those crossings. Movement sustains movement. The empire stretches not through conquest alone, but through synchronized logistics. Steam navigation compresses travel time while multiplying points requiring maintenance. Communication cables follow similar paths beneath the ocean floor. Insulated lines laid along seabeds linking administrative centers to distant ports. Messages accelerate, but ships still travel at mechanical speed. Information arrives faster than material correction. A disturbance along one route forces rerouting through another. Traffic concentrates. Ports experience congestion. Repair delays propagate outward along schedules calibrated for efficiency rather than interruption. None of these conditions appear catastrophic. Trade continues. Ships depart and arrive. Scale shifts. The North Atlantic becomes a corridor of constant transit. Coal, manufactured goods, grain, raw materials. Insurance markets in London calculate risk based on predictable passage. Shipping lanes resemble circulatory systems, carrying energy outward and resources inward. Coal powers both merchant fleets and naval escorts guarding maritime continuity. Protection follows dependency rather than preceding it. A navy fueled by coal must remain within range of supply. Warships cannot patrol indefinitely without access to replenishment. Strategic geography narrows accordingly. Choke points acquire disproportionate weight. Suez Canal, Strait of Malacca, Cape of Good Hope. Control concentrates around passage rather than territory itself. Distance persists beneath efficiency. Each additional lane increases exposure. Storm damage, mechanical failure, labor disruption, or blockage at a single point reverberates across schedules thousands of miles away. Ships queue, cargo waits. Industrial production inland begins responding to events occurring beyond visibility. The system compensates by expanding redundancy, more stations, larger depots, faster ships consuming greater quantities of fuel. Extraction intensifies in coal fields already heavily worked. Rail networks thicken to move fuel toward ports at increasing speed. Urban centers grow around industrial demand, tied indirectly to maritime continuity. Pressure accumulates without announcement. Coal dust settles across mining regions. Output must remain continuous. Seasonal fluctuation threatens scheduling precision. Labor stoppages interrupt loading rates. Shipping timetables adjust, but adjustment itself introduces delay. The empire's mobility depends less on expansion than on uninterrupted synchronization between mine, rail, port, and sea. Another shift. Across the Indian Ocean, ships converge at refueling points spaced according to consumption curves calculated in London decades earlier. Technology improves efficiency, yet operational range still anchors movement to predictable stops. Sea lanes become habitual. Habit produces expectation. Expectation produces rigidity. Alternative routes remain longer, more expensive, slower. Infrastructure investment reinforces existing corridors rather than diversifying them. Merchant shipping clusters along protected passages, guarded by naval presence whose own endurance depends on the same fuel network. Protection and vulnerability overlap. The empire appears strongest where traffic is densest, yet density concentrates consequence. Interruption at a canal delays entire fleets. Congestion increases reliance on precise timing. Coal stockpiles must anticipate uncertainty months in advance. Forecast replaces flexibility. Time becomes terrain. Decisions made years earlier about station placement shape present movement regardless of changing conditions. Ships follow. Inherited routes, because deviation exceeds logistical tolerance. Expansion stabilizes into maintenance. Maintenance absorbs increasing capacity. Recognition approaches quietly. Mobility once reduced distance. Now distance defines required effort simply to preserve motion already achieved. Coal consumption rises not to expand reach, but to prevent contraction. Naval deployment increasingly protects fuel access rather than trade itself. Choice appears here, but options narrow. To reduce dependence would require abandoning established lanes. To maintain them requires continuous extraction and guarded passage across oceans that cannot shorten. The structure reveals itself not through collapse, but through necessity. One question remains suspended. At what point does a system built to overcome geography become permanently bound to it? Sea lanes continue carrying traffic. Coal continues moving outward from mines toward ships whose schedules assume uninterrupted replenishment. Ports operate. Signals transmit. The network functions. Yet strain resides within repetition. Storm seasons recur. Mechanical wear accumulates. Infrastructure ages even while appearing permanent. Each successful voyage confirms reliance on conditions that must be recreated endlessly across vast distance. The island remains where it always was, separated from continental resources, connected outward through water requiring constant traversal. Coal seams gradually deepen underground, extraction extending further for equivalent output. Ships grow larger, demanding greater fuel reserves. Efficiency improvements delay, but do not eliminate requirement. Movement persists because stopping exceeds tolerance. Across oceans, refueling stations glow at night, temporary islands of continuity surrounded by darkness. Ships arrive precisely as planned, depart again, leaving behind diminished stockpiles awaiting replenishment from thousands of miles away. Nothing announces limitation. The structure endures through coordination so extensive that interruption becomes difficult to imagine from within it. Sea lanes remain open. Coal continues burning. Distance remains bridged. Pressure does not resolve. It travels with every vessel crossing water already mapped by necessity, sustained by fuel extracted elsewhere, dependent on passages that cannot widen, only endure continued use. Motion preserved by the same geography that quietly determines how far preservation can extend. If you found meaning here, you're welcome to explore more on Timeless Questions, where we examine history not for answers but for understanding.